1493, when the first Benedictine monastery of men was established in North Dakota, the monks went about building a barn almost as soon as they secured a dwelling for themselves. Horses, dairy, and beef cattle were purchased, and land was obtained for pasture and the cultivation of grain and hay.
Why was the farm so important for the abbey? Because monasteries have always had farms to help make them self-supporting and to be part of the local culture, I suppose. We're in a rural area, and I think most of the monasteries of Swiss and American congregation had farms at one time, except maybe Newark, which was a city monastery.
It was a necessity. They had the farm as a means of raising the food, and they had big gardens and they had cattle. It was a means of providing food.
The acquisition of farmland was vital because, in the words of Saint Benedict, they are truly monks who live by the labor of their own hands. North Dakota pioneer monks were intent upon earning their own living. Meat, milk, and butter were produced for their table, as well as for the students accepted into the monastery's school and the older men living with the monks in charity. The surplus was sold for cash. Extensive gardens and chickens rounded out the necessary details of homesteading at a period in history when groceries were not easily obtained. The farm in early days had the luxury of sufficient numbers of monk workers, priests and lay brothers, who tilled fields, cut hay, threshed wheat and oats, milked dairy cows, sloughed pigs, looked after beef cattle, and secured fence line for pasture. A goodly number of novices carried with them all the practical aspects of this kind of work, having grown up on farms. No one had to tell them how to hitch horses, milk cows, or butcher pigs. The scope of the Abbey farm operation crossed the usual spectrum, meaning that the monks worked just like their neighbors. However, by 1922, the farm was feeding 59 monks and 93 students. By 1952, it was feeding 79 monks and 133 students, a significant accomplishment given the fact that the Abbey holdings were not much larger than an average family farm.
The whole front area was garden. There was a huge potato field out west to pasture now. It had been a golf course before that. And of course, you had a good-sized beef herd because they used to slaughter cattle to feed the monks and the students, and dairy cows for milk, for butter. I don't know whether they ever made cheese here, but I know they made butter. I don't know if they were still doing it when I came, but they had before that. And of course, a good-sized herd of pigs down in the farmyard. Remember, every morning Brother Lawrence, the pig keeper, used to trundle his cart of garbage down there. And I suppose with the monks here and the students, you had quite a bit of garbage. And then the chicken barn off to the east was quite extensive, raising all the chickens. And one of the jobs of novices was to clean chickens when they were butchered. And of course provide all our own eggs. We had quite a few eggs, especially during Lent. And the garden was huge, set in front of the monastery, in front of former school building, out towards Schnell Hall. That whole area was garden.
In the late 60s, a cash crunch caused many changes in the farm operation, which became ever more focused upon productivity. Pork was cheaper to buy than to raise, Dairy cows were particularly hard on the pastures, and milk processing became ever more and more scrutinized by the government. Chickens were impractical. Of all the various ways in which monks had utilized the farm, beef cattle seemed best suited for the circumstances, and so the fields were no longer seeded with flax, wheat, and corn, but devoted exclusively to hay and oats for a cow-calf operation. Pastures were subdivided into smaller units for more effective grazing. Decisions were based upon sustainable farming. Steady improvements were made according to current knowledge, always in favor of land health.
If you have the cows, turn the cows in the springtime, they tend to eat the best grass first. And that if you all do that year after year, the best grasses die out and the poor grasses tend to take over. So by controlled grazing, you make the cows eat the poor grass also. And when they have everything grazed down, then you turn them into the next pasture. And of course there are small ways like if you graze one pasture first one year, then the following year you should graze that second or graze it last. So you alternate the grazing from one year to another.
Each year the herd was trimmed to match the supply of hay for winter feeding. If late winter drought was experienced, calves were weaned early and sold. Animals were chosen for brood stock according to their temperament and size, and also based upon their productivity. Over time, the herd took on a value that was virtually synonymous with the ethic of the farm operation.
The land is yours. You work it. It feeds you. It takes care of you. And that's always been part of our tradition.
I think the neighbors appreciate the fact that the monks had a farm, that the monks work. It's sort of, I could identify with the neighbors, or they could identify with me, and we had something in common.
The history of the Abbey farm has been anchored in the value of witness of monks as farmers. A kind of bond is formed with neighbors when monks do the same work as they do. A common base of understanding and a degree of credibility is earned in stewardship of the land, experiencing the same joys, frustrations, hopes, and anxieties of the farmers and ranchers who attend Mass in the Abbey Church.
We worked in the garden, hoeing and harvesting, and in the clericate in the seminary, the farm boss would often ask for help to pitch bundles at threshing time. And we all liked that. We considered it was more manly work than working in the garden. So there was never any lack of volunteers to go pitch bundles. And Father Roma, the farm boss, was a good boss to work for, very considerate. And of course you empty one wagon of bundles and you could rest until the next one came in. So you worked intensively for a while, but then you had rest in between.
Economics alone has never completely dictated the farming operation. Yet income, particularly from the sale of beef cattle, has played an important role in the cash flow required for the overall operation of the monastic community. The decision to close the farm and rent the fields and pastures was made because, at the present time, there happens to be no one in the Abbey community interested, willing, and able to take up the strenuous duties of managing a 1,900-acre cow-calf operation. That might change in the future if a young rancher joins the Abbey. For the time being, the Abbey monks still enjoy the tranquility of their prairie home. Cows still graze in their pastures, even if those cows belong to the neighbor.
We decided to quit the cattle farming because there was not enough help. I'm too old. There's not enough new monks who are able to do it. It takes practice and it takes experience and it's hard work. The basic problem is the fact that there are just not enough monks to do the work, and it's not practical. It doesn't work financially. It does not work to hire somebody to do the managing and to do the work, because there has to be a guarantee that the labor is always available.
Farming and ranching were never the only things that monks of Assumption Abbey did for a living. Today they are actively involved in parish work in North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and South Dakota. They teach at the University of Mary, Dickinson State University, St. Meinrad School of Theology, and in Bogota, Colombia. They work as chaplains and on Indian reservations, and a core community resides year-round at the Abbey, maintaining the grounds and buildings, doing the housework, laundry, bread baking, meal planning, administration, and other necessary duties to create a smooth community life.